All right, we are back. Welcome to the Pineapple Perspective, hosted by Troy Hooper. That's me. And we are sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants, of course. Proudly wearing the bright yellow today. First time wearing the bright yellow on the podcast, Derek.
Looks
Today we
nice.
have a really special guest, really intelligent guy who's going to share a lot of gold nuggets for us. So, really excited about that. Derek Smith uh, with Canopy Metrics, data analyst, data collection, data aggregation, data measurement for restaurants and others. Derek, great to have you on, my friend.
Really good to be here, Troy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. Before we get into what you do and what kind of information you have to share about the restaurant industry today, we do like to get to know our guests a little bit and understand what perspective you're coming from. So I always start off by asking, Derek, what does hospitality mean to you?
Oh, that's a nice, juicy question to start out. Hospitality, it goes beyond obviously the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, the hospitality industry, right? I think that when I have somebody over to my house, I'm being hospitable. I'm offering them hospitality. I really think it comes down to just having a guest-centric sort of point of view, right? When somebody comes to my house, if I'm playing a playlist, but I know that they're really into a certain type of music, I just put that music on for them, right? Because I'm thinking about them. I'm not necessarily thinking about me. And I think that extends to, when somebody comes into a hotel, if you know a little bit something about that guest and there's some way that you can make the experience a little bit more personalized, you're offering them, exceptional hospitality, right? And it just, if you have that sort of guest centric mentality in everything that you do, I think you're being a good sort of hospitable business, if that makes sense.
Well, people might get a clue. It's a little early in the conversation for people to try to nail down where you might be from, but we like to say our friends to the north are a little bit friendlier, a little bit more welcoming, a little bit more hospitable, maybe. Tell us where you are in the great north across the border for us.
So I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, originally from Calgary, which I love Vancouver. I think Calgary is probably one of the more hospitable places to be in Canada. So it's the friendliest part of friendly Canada.
That's amazing. Well, that's amazing. I can say Calgary is amazing. I grew up going to the Stampede with my grandparents. My stepmom's parents went to the Stampede every year because they did this around the continent tour in their RV and always made sure. So they flew me up or would fly me to somewhere and I would drive for a couple of weeks with them across Canada. So I've actually seen most all of Canada in person as a young man. But yeah, Vancouver is actually one of my favorite cities, by the way. I think it's a phenomenal city, one of the most beautiful waterfront environments, just absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, Vancouver's had a pretty big growth boom over the last 10
Oh
years or
yeah.
so, and I know it's continuing. So I can imagine that it feels a little more hospitable back at home in Calgary. But Derek, tell me, growing up in Calgary, where you say it's very very friendly, where did that mindset come from? How did you learn what hospitality was? How did you experience receiving or giving hospitality as a young man that kind of formed your thesis about what it means and how to deliver it?
Yeah, I moved from Calgary when I was 16, but I remember like the very first experiences that I had when it came to like good hospitality was this multi-unit group up here in Canada called Swiss Chalet. I think I don't know how many units they had, but it was a big brand when I was a kid, and they had awesome roast chicken dinners and everything. And that was where my parents and I, my brothers, we went when we were, once a month we'd go, right, and it split the half chicken meal or whatever. And I remember after every meal they would always bring out this like treasure chest of, at the time I thought it was the coolest toys you could ever buy with money, but they were dollar store toys and it's just this big kind of hoopla. They'd bring it out to be like, oh, which toy are you going to get today? And me and my brothers just loved it. And I remember my parents used to always say, oh, we can try a different spot. We can try going somewhere else for dinner. And we would never have it. Me and my brothers would always say, no, we're going to Swiss Chalet. That's the place we go. And
Because
I
you
don't know.
get a
They
free toy.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's other elements too. I think it was just the way that the staff leaned into it and made it exciting for the kids. And White Spot's another group here in British Columbia that really caters towards like older audience and younger audience. It's something where like my kids now really like to go there. And I think it's such a good thing because for me now, for the rest of my life, Swiss Chalet has been a brand that I always look forward to eating at, even if, it's not the same quality as I remember or whatever the case may be.
Well, I got to tell you, I completely forgot about that in my entire life until you just said it, and now I remember the treasure chest. I remember
Hmm.
having gone there. That's a weird. That's a weird. You opened a drawer and pulled out a dusty old file and said, "Look, remember this? You've had this
Yeah.
experience." That's pretty phenomenal. Very cool. Very cool. So you grow up in Canada, you kind of recognize some of these opportunities that have happened to you. On this show, one of the things we like to remind people, and our thesis is that, while a lot of people say that no matter what business you're in the people business, we take that one step further. We think everybody is or should be in the hospitality business, no matter what business they're in. You're in a SaaS product, right? Subscription software program that helps restaurants with their data. So in that world, people might look at you and think, "Well, what does this guy know about hospitality? How could him as a business owner and operator running a SaaS product, how could he deliver hospitality?" So I was going to challenge you and ask you, in your business on a day to day, whether to your customers, your colleagues, your coworkers, employees, whatnot, other vendors you work with, how do you bring that thesis to life? How do you deliver hospitality as Derek Smith?
That's a great question. It's something that is a learned process. I mean, I've basically been managing my own business now for, about a year and a half. But I would say that I use these principles even earlier on as well. Essentially what I do, and I know we'll get into it in a little bit, is helping businesses produce dashboards or visualize their information more effectively. And one of the kind of defaults when you're an analyst is to just show like all these cool charts that you can build, right? And oh, look at all these cool things that I did. But if, as I was talking about earlier, if you really approach it as like a guest-centric sort of mentality, I really try to remember every time I engage with a client, this is about them. This isn't about me, right? If they can't understand this dashboard, then it's dead in the water, right? It has to be about them. It has to be about the processes that they currently have and sort of figure out a way that I can make what I'm building flow with their river. And that took quite a few years to really understand. It wasn't something that was that I was doing at the beginning, right? At the beginning, it was like, let's make the coolest dashboard that we possibly can. And then clients would look at it and be like, I don't know what's going on here. This isn't going to work, right? So I think about that every single day. And really, like, when we think about serving a table, now every time, I'm working with a new client, if you look at it from that perspective, it's a table. It's somebody who's coming in. They've decided to come into your house. They've decided to work with you. Treat them as if you would treat guests in your restaurant, except I only have 2 or 3 tables. It's a lot easier to manage, right? That's an interesting approach for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely very interesting. So when you think about um, data that we as restaurateurs need to have access to, um, and moreover, when we have the access, understand what it is we're looking at. Because I experience that a lot when I talk to SaaS companies, particularly salespeople that work inside of SaaS companies. And I've had experiences where we get on a call and we're 24 minutes in before they take a breath and ask a question. Well, I was lost inside the first 3 minutes, but you didn't take a breath long enough for me to like stop you and say, "Hey, I have a question from 20 minutes ago." That's a fun experience. Uh, but when you think about looking at it from their perspective, how do you have that insight? How do you have that wherewithal? Where does it come from that you know what the restaurateur needs to know? Is that really about a discovery process? Is it really about just going in knowing that they likely don't know what they don't know? Talk a little bit about that initial introduction to understanding that you even need to look at this as a restaurateur.
I think that I generally do this without even thinking about it. I split the conversation really into two pieces, or the discovery into two pieces. So the first piece is, every group that I'm working with, the owner, the manager, whomever is looking to employ somebody that does what I do, you know, they have something that's keeping them up at night. They have some form of stress that's just, gotten to a certain point where it's bubbled over, and now they're looking for outside help to help them manage that. And so that's really where I start. It's like, what is that stress? What's keeping you up at night? What's a piece of information that you wish you had, or maybe you do have it, but you wish it was presented more effectively? So that's step one. But then step two really is like looking at their P&L and saying, hey, I'm going to help you with this. I can show you revenue every single day, but revenue is only a very small component of what's going to make your business more sustainable. Let's look at your profitability, and let's look at the elements of your profit and see if there's other opportunities that we can start to impact. Things like labor, cost of sale, obviously manage controllable costs. There's a bunch of different angles to take it, but I think it's really important, if you're doing this type of work with a client, is to make sure that you just understand where they're at, as far as like how much do they understand, how complex is their business currently, what does their data look like. All of those sort of elements are going to feed into the ultimate solution for the client.
Derek, give us a little bit of background about you before we get too deep into sort of your information, the nuggets you're going to share with us about real world experiences in this space. You say you started Canopy just over a year and a half ago. What's your background and why restaurants, I guess, also as part of that answer?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, the only jobs that I've ever done has been in customer service. I had a brief stint working for the municipal government here in Vancouver, but when you move from a hospitality business into a municipal government setting, that's just like,
Yeah.
I was clawing at the door trying to get back out and then get back into hospitality. Yeah, I don't know. I've just always loved customer service. I went from a customer service job into a sales job, and then when I was in university, I was doing I was a server and went into shift leading and management, and then eventually came out and got a job with a really really good company up here in Canada called Cactus Club. Worked as a purchasing analyst for Cactus, and I kind of just figured it out. I loved analytics when I was in business school, and when I worked on the purchasing side, I worked under a fantastic boss who just kind of challenged me a lot, and then it was the most amazing experience to have this section of the business that I could analyze and ultimately influence strategy in. Because people would just, they would say, okay, well, this guy's showing data. He's not showing an opinion. These are factual information. So if we do this, it leads to this. And I could start to see that flow of like data equals strategy equals profit. And that sort of extended more and more within that business, where we started to look at profit as a whole. So we look at the whole P&L and look at every element of it and start to develop all these sorts of analytics off of it. And it just sort of progressed. I worked for a business where I was the head of business intelligence there for a couple of years. And then eventually I just thought, you know what? This is really fun. It'd probably be more fun to do this for more and more restaurants rather than just like one at a time. So that's sort of the genesis.
Very cool. I'll tell everybody, if you get a chance to go to Vancouver, I recommend two restaurants to most people. One is Rodney's, because I think it's the best oysters off the ice I've ever had. And sort of the old Rodney's, not the new Rodney's, and on the way from the airport. And Cactus Grill is one of my favorites down there. Right on the water at the
Coal
docks.
Harbor.
Yeah, at the harbor, right at the cruise ship dock, their area, because you can walk from downtown. It's right there, and I was very very impressed with that business. And then when I learned, as I do, I go to a place and I experience it for the first time, and I'm like impressed with the restaurant. And the hospitality and just the whole game, the whole thing they had going on there was a very sort of refined sophistication without being stuffy. It was where like sort of the business elite went without it being too like boys club, is the way I felt about it. Anyway, I was there at happy hour after work kind of a thing. And so I of course look them up, right? You got to be curious when you're in a new place. Well, who is this Cactus? And then I realized, oh, it's a group. Like they have multiple brands, they have lots of stores. I couldn't believe how many Cactus grills there were in the area. Like, wow, you can sustain these large format. I liken it to, for those in the US that it maybe, especially on the East Coast, if you've ever been to J. Alexander's or a Houston's, but imagine a 4 or 5x size, right? Imagine a 20,000 square foot J. Alexander's or something like that. But Yeah, cool experience. I'm glad you brought that up. So talk to us a little bit about um, okay, you started with what's the problem? And that's easy, right? Okay, you have A problem, B problem, C problem. You want to know more about these things. You can build or model your tool around that, right?
Mhm.
Talk a little bit more about the things that restaurateurs of any size don't know they need to know, or more importantly, don't know that they can get access to that information. I think we all sit here and can think about all the things we would like to know or we think we need to know, but we just have no idea how to access that. And if we access it, how to make sense of it. So talk a little bit about some of those topics and some specifics in that realm.
Yeah, sure. I think that one of the biggest hidden gems is actually information that's very accessible and most people intuitively understand what it is, and that's covers per labor hour. I think 95% of restaurants look at labor cost percentage, and it makes sense. It's a KPI that people understand and have been using for decades. But really, the power of covers per labor hour, essentially how many people came into your restaurant and how many hours did you use to service those people. It's incredible once you can get into it and you get your staff trained up on what it means. Just Cole's notes, in the next minute or so, basically what it does is it takes labor cost, which when you think about it is made up of average wage and labor hours. And then on the revenue side, it's average check times covers, right? Well, it's really hard for an operator to influence average check. You can in a certain way, with ads and upsells and that sort of thing, but that's really a strategic sort of pricing decision that's being made at head office. So it's really hard for an operator to influence that at store level. And average wage is also really difficult for them to influence. But those have very large impacts on labor cost percentage when you increase your menu prices or when the minimum wage goes up. So these were things that we were always trying to battle as analysts. It's like we'd have a minimum wage increase and then we'd have to go through and readjust all of the labor cost targets because they were all, those variables were included, right? So it just kind of dawned on us one day, and I'm not saying we created this, but we definitely came up with the idea independently. So we said, let's just take out these two variables that operators can't control and just say, listen, the only thing that we think you should be focused on in store, how many people came in and how many hours did you use to service those people? And realistically, if you know what that prime number is, let's say it's 2.5 covers per labor hour, and you just provide the best service at that number, then that becomes your target always. And it doesn't matter what your average wage does or your average check does. Those are strategic decisions at head office. This is what I want you to focus on. And the customers that I've worked with, my business partner, Jim Taylor, he's been doing this. That's kind of like his whole shtick. It has tremendous success for restaurants for sure.
Yeah, I think you're boiling something down to its simplest measurable terms, right? Give people a metric they can measure and compare to itself over time, and then they have a roadmap. They have something to work with, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
most of them, you're right, are chasing a variable of numbers, sometimes multiple variable numbers, and then when one changes, they don't know how to affect the others. So what do? They raise prices.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you didn't need to raise prices. Maybe it was a small price raise and a labor, architecture adjustment. How do I work with my schedule? I'll tell you, one of the first things we've done as a consulting practice for many years, and I preach this from the rooftops all the time. You don't need me to show you how to do it. Is very similar in that we say sales per half hour. Just to run a report. If whatever system you have, you can do that with. Hopefully, you're able to get something. Some systems are down to an hour only, but if you can get 15 minutes, it's a lot more data. It's a lot bigger chart, but that's the best. But I usually say a half hour. If you can run a report for a month that says sales per half hour, 24 hours a day for that month, it takes some time. But man, if you want to affect your strategic scheduling in regards to phase in, phase out throughout a shift day, you want to have a really good idea about prep hours and what's really needed or not needed, and even your hours. People have a very anecdotal understanding of what the right hours are for their business, and 15 minutes makes a big difference over a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you open or close or whatnot, 30 or 15 minutes difference and that changes your entire schedule by 15 or 30 minutes, that accumulates over a year. And so those are little things, but they're little things that add up. And so we've always been very aligned with what you're saying there. And I agree with you. I think there's more than one chart you need to look at. But similarly, have one, pick something.
Mm-hmm.
And that ours was dollars per labor hour rather than covers. But similarly, it's so that you have something that is measurable. And one thing that once you sort of optimize for it, then it makes it very trackable. Tuesday versus Tuesday versus Tuesday versus Tuesday, right? The second Tuesday of July versus the second Tuesday of July last year, right? The last 3 months, the second Tuesday of each month for the last 3 months, because then you can really find trends. You can it causes you to ask yourself, well, why? Why is the third Tuesday always this? Why is it always as busy as a Thursday night? Like, why is that Tuesday? Well, it's hockey season, or it's theater season, right? Or there's some other thing that happens in your neighborhood. Now you need to go find that thing. Like, what is going on? You need to ask your customers, like, all right, customer, it's busy as heck here on the third Tuesday of every month, or only in the summer. What's going on? Oh, yeah, well, didn't you know such and such goes on down the street? There's the such and such festival or whatever. Now you're like, oh, okay, we have an understanding. You have to ask yourself why. Why do these things happen? Why is this an anomaly? And if you find the anomalies, you can normalize for it. Because if you realize that the second and fourth Wednesday every month, you are at like half, you're on a Monday afternoon price point here in revenue. You need to not have the same staff for those 2 Wednesdays every month that you have for the other Thursdays or whatever. Those are the kinds of things that I really think it comes down to time. I think it comes down to restaurateurs not A, having the time, B, not allocating the time, not understanding that information is available, that information is important, how to use that information, how to create an action plan from that. So talk a little bit about some case studies or examples where you were able to illuminate something that they either wanted to know or didn't know they needed to know, and then they were able to take an action step as a result of that and make a meaningful difference.
I think a really good example, when I was focused more on COGS with one group, cost of sale. Basically what happened was when I came in, the food cost variance, like they were tracking theoretical and actual for food, and there was a food cost variance, but nobody trusted the number. It was this, let's say it was 3.5%. It was just some number that, like, you ask the chefs and they would say, oh, we don't trust it. Every time we get this report, like, there's errors, we find them all the time. So I said to the business, I think that one way that we can really help here is to make sure that number, that food cost variance, that there is no question of its veracity. This is 100% correct. Nobody can question whether or not it's correct or not, because that was a shield, right? That was something that the operators were using as a shield. They were saying, it's not correct, therefore I'm not even going to pay attention to it. So, it took a couple months of just going through all the recipes, all the yields, double checking with the regional chefs. Hey, are you guys comfortable with these yields? Yes, we are. We went through all the theoreticals were spot on. The actuals are obviously spot on. We just got everything dialed down. And then we released a report, and it was a report with 30x restaurants, something like that, and had all of the restaurants ranked by food cost. Now, this wasn't like a thing where we said, if you're at the top, you're good. If you're at the bottom, you're bad, right? It was literally we just put it out there, just gave it to the chefs, and with a message that said, if you doubt the veracity of this number and you think there's something incorrect, here's my direct number. Call me. I'll walk you through every single calculation in this formula, right? And instantaneously, it was like, okay, now there's a lot of fires lit, right? Everybody's starting to go, okay, hold on a minute. This is a little bit, I got to really focus on this. And literally, like, the business did nothing, didn't have any other communication other than that. And for month after month after month, we saw the food costs just start to just go down, right? Because nobody could hide behind it. Yeah, and they couldn't hide behind it. And everybody wanted to be at the top. Nobody wanted to be at the bottom, but it wasn't enforced by the business at all. And yeah, I think we managed to decrease the food cost revenue first year or food cost variance by 0.7% or something like that, our basis points. So it was like significant amount of money, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good example. I've got hundreds of them, but that was one that I always remember. It was a really, really good thing. And because it didn't take any work from the operators, right? They didn't have to do anything. The business didn't have to do anything. We just had to make sure that people trusted the information that we were supplying to them.
Well, and that's a huge point. I've had a management company for a long time. We took over a lot of distressed assets. We tried to normalize and optimize and get people in line with systems and processes. And you're right. Either they don't trust it, or it's not been explained. Most likely, or they just were never taught. Right. At the end of the day, you can have 20 chefs, head chefs, and they're going to have 20 different levels of skill and knowledge around the business acumen, around understanding the numbers, around understanding why their food cost or labor cost changes, and then being able to track that down, right? And be able to understanding it proactively is so much more important. Reactive is hard, right? Reactive is analyzing a problem after it's happened versus identifying an opportunity and addressing it in advance. I think that's a really cool example that you gave. I think that people listening need to think about it doesn't take a large swing in improvement to make a massive accumulative value to your business. I'll tell you in Pepper Lunch last Monday, a week ago today, or Tuesday, sorry, a week ago tomorrow, we launched an updated menu at Pepper Lunch in the United States. And we've had to have the similar conversations with our franchisees to explain to them and show them the calculations and explain to them what it means to their business. We have lowered food cost. Theoretical food cost has gone down a little over 2%.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty massive. Now that's predominantly negotiating for larger supply chain going forward. But we also were able to negotiate some phenomenal improvements to some significant ingredients. We were able to get a much higher quality salmon, hand cut fillet side of salmon versus a processed sort of block in a bag kind of a thing. It's a much superior product at half the price. We were able to get a local regional fish house to do hand carving for us. And because we're not buying it from some conglomerate in Finland or whatever it is, we were able to save a little over $5 a pound and get a better product for it, right? And so cumulatively over those 5 stores over a year, the volume of salmon that they sell, it's a huge impact to the bottom line. I'm excited because what's really going to happen is more people are going to buy that salmon. Mm-hmm. So the theoretical improvement versus the actual we'll see a year from today is going to be massively different, because I think as people experience the higher quality ingredients that we brought in, the adjusted portions, the again optimized and reformulated recipes for proper yield. I think when people experience that in the store over the next number of months, it's going to drive additional visits. I think it's going to drive people to order different things. Yes, salmon costs more than almost anything on the menu. And so if we sell more salmon because it's a higher quality salmon, half our cost, not only is our profitability on that single item dramatically improved, but we're going to sell more of it, right? Mm-hmm. So our total profitability, as you started off saying at the beginning of this conversation, is going to go up. So I think that is, I've been started to yell that from the rooftops the last few months. I was on a panel for the California Restaurant Association, and Paul on our team was there, and he filmed me give a pretty passionate answer to a couple of questions around this. And it was really about, pay attention, get involved, understand. And if you don't, get help, right? And there's software, and there's analysts, and there's specialists in that you can hire as consultants temporarily in supply chain management, right? And you were fortunate to be a part of some restaurant groups that had that in-house, or other companies that had that in-house. That's, that takes a pretty significant investment, but the value prop pays for your job, right? And so similar to your software, let's talk a little bit about that. What is Canopy Metrics? What does it do? Who does it do it for? Why do I need it?
Thank you for that. It's actually not software per se. I do create software as part of what I offer, but essentially what Canopy Metrics is we take we help restaurants, primarily restaurants and hotels, but I work with a lot of other businesses as well, use their information more effectively to make more profit. That's kind of the Coles notes, but really, there's three parts to that. A lot of businesses have, like, look at restaurants. They've got millions of points of data that they accumulate every year, and you probably use 5% of it, and probably all of it is coming from revenue, right? So what I'll do when I work with a group is I'll come in and I'll say, hey, you have all this data. Here's all the measures that we can create for you, and we can present it in this way in Power BI. That's my tool, but some people use Tableau. I can use Tableau as well, or Looker. So I'll say, let's just think about how we can visualize this information more effectively. I think that restaurant SaaS products are very good at helping us collect and manage information, but not necessarily visualize it. I think that the visualization in most SaaS products is not quite there yet. So it's really hard to gain insight quickly. And that's kind of my goal, is I want to help you gain insight and figure out action items within 1 minute. That's always been my goal with any dashboard I create. So visualization is the first one. I would say that the second one is really advising groups on how they should be meeting with each other. I think that a lot of restaurants, don't necessarily know how to set up a performance measurement plan. So if you have owners, regional managers, and then store managers, it's like, what does that hierarchy of performance measurement look like? Who says what to whom and how often is really the key. And then obviously I do a lot of analysis services as well, where everything that we've talked about today, labor analytics, cost of sale analytics, sort of ad hoc reporting. That's sort of my bread and butter, is just working with clients on individual things like that.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. So you create these, I'm going to be very basic for the audience that's listening. Sure. You basically create dashboards, and then you import and organize that data so it's most digestible, most understandable, and then you help deliver information that therefore becomes actionable, but also trackable, right? So now that you have this information, you know what it's for, you know what it means, you know what you should do to make that number change, or whatever that is. Then now we can continuously deliver that information in this place, in this way that you understand it. So do you sometimes change how the visualization looks? Like, maybe some people respond to a bar graph versus a pie chart versus a, up and to the right, graph chart. Like, how customizable is that?
Very customizable. And yes, it changes with every client. And, I'll usually come in with a recommendation. So let's say I'm working with a group and they say, we're looking to have more insight into our revenue. So you were talking about getting revenue down to 30-minute increments. Most point of sale will have that information available. So I'll just help to sort of grab that information and visualize it, typically on a bar chart, and I'll compare those 30-minute increments to like a 6-week average, so that there's some normalization that's happening, right? And I'll show the client, I'll say, without doing any explanation, I'll say, what's happening here? What do you see? And have them just look at it for a minute or two. And if they can't grab that insight within, a minute or two, I didn't do my job effectively. So maybe we need to use a line chart or something like that to be able to show it. Or maybe it's a table, right? Or maybe there's not two comparative lines and really I'm just showing the variance or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways to massage that. And really that's part of the whole process. Like, once the dashboard's developed and it's in a production plan, and it's being sent to the client once a week or once a day, easy peasy, everybody's good, right? But really that visual component, that's the part that takes a little bit of work, a little back and forth to figure out how we want to present it.
Yeah, that's very cool. So do you break this down into sort of front of the house, back of the house, corporate metrics, store by store, clusters of store? How's that hierarchy or that enterprise sort of element work out?
It all depends, and this is unfortunately an answer that I have to give a lot with these sort of situations, because whatever SaaS product that you're working with will really dictate the type of information that we'll have access to. So for instance, right now, Toast is trying to work on a customer-facing API, but they don't have an API readily available for most customers, right? I'm really looking forward to when that day comes. So you really are, you have two options. You can use their, I don't want to get too technical, it's called SFTP, right? So that's one process that you can use, or you can just use their data internally and extract it manually and all of that sort of stuff, right? So, that's an example of like how it kind of just depends, because then you work with a group like Margin Edge or something like that. Like maybe it's a little bit easier and the information's a bit different. If I had access to everything, and if the client wanted to use the dashboard on their computer and they're highly engaged in the dashboard, I would give them as much information as they can handle, because you visualize it at a summary level, but then you have every one of your visualizations, have the ability to drill down as far as you can go. There's a method that I've always worked with. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called the 5 whys, right? So to get to causation, you can ask 5 whys. So if your profit is down, you ask why. It might be your revenue. Well, why? It might be your covers. Well, why? Right? You can keep going down. And if I can make my dashboard answer 5 whys and get to causation, that's like the greatest thing in the world. But most restaurant groups just don't. A lot of the groups that I work with just want a PDF sent to their email once a week, right? And just show me all this information. I'll use it in my staff meeting. That's totally fine. For more sophisticated customers, we'll go really deep into that for sure.
Yeah, I learned 7 whys, but
there you go.
Seven gets really uncomfortable, by the way.
Yeah, I bet.
Sometimes you're like, I don't know. What else do you want me to say?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, the answer is whenever you stop having an answer to why is the number of whys. Yeah, I love the 5 whys. Very good. Well, this has been very illuminating, my friend. Really appreciate having you on. We're going to ask you a couple of silly questions, but before we do, how do people find out about Canopy? How do they find Derek? How do they follow and learn more from you? You have a podcast. Please share that as well, so people can learn a lot more about this topic.
Yeah, thank you. Jim Taylor and I, we run a podcast called Tableside Podcast. Awesome. It's more fun than anything. That's kind of why we started it. We just wanted to chat to cool people, and I think so far it's been great. So that's our podcast. You can check that out on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. And then Canopy Metrics. I do have a website, canopymetrics.ca. The best place to reach out to me, though, is just on LinkedIn. I try to post often, and I've got a newsletter called Tech to Table on there as well, where I put a lot of these sort of ideas into the newsletter. But yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a direct message. I always say this, it's always free to have a conversation, right? Yeah. It doesn't cost money to just say, hey, this is what we're doing. What do you think about it? So yeah, I just love meeting people. I think it's awesome.
Well, keep putting out all that great info, because it's illuminating, it's inspiring, it's helpful, it's educational, and hopefully it's going to help business people in whatever industry they're in, but particularly in our hospitality industry, find insights to things they really need to know, whether they need to know them or not. So let's keep this to the Great White North. What's the best poutineery? Where do we go for the poutine when we come to town?
You got to go to Montreal. You're not finding that over here on the West Coast. That's Montreal. I think would probably be the best place for poutine. But and they have. There's a couple places there too where they'll have like smoked meat that they put on top of the poutine. Oh man, that's just that's the best.
Yeah, just remember, going to Montreal, I think less people speak English than they do in Paris, but
well, really, I think they do speak English.
French language.
They do speak English. They just won't speak it to you.
That's true. That's right.
Yeah.
There's an audacity there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm coming to Vancouver before the end of the year. I'm excited about that. I'll certainly be hitting up Rodney's, no doubt. But what's your top recommendation for somebody coming to town, maybe coming for the summer to enjoy the weather, get out on the water, and have some great seafood? What's your favorite seafood spot in town?
You know what? I got to call out Le Crocodile. It's a little bit more pricey, but like I was mentioned with Jim Taylor with Tableside Podcast, he and Rob Feeney, who's a internationally renowned chef, and Jim Stewart, probably the top 3 hospitality personalities that I know locally here. They've all sort of joined forces and just reopened Le Crocodile. It is unbelievable. I was really blessed to be able to go there and check it out on one of the opening nights. And the service is excellent. The food is excellent. The food is beyond excellent. It's amazing. They got a sommelier walking around. Like, you're going to be treated quite nice. Let us know when you're coming too.
That was my next statement.
Yeah.
Do I know somebody, wink, wink, that can get me in? Because it sounds like it's going to be a popular spot.
You sure do. Yeah, you sure do, for sure. Yeah.
All right, last question. People come to Vancouver, besides great food and the beautiful environment, what's something they should do? What's unique to that area? What's something you'd recommend somebody go out and check out or do while they're there?
I mean, we're right beside the ocean, so there's a lot of water activities, but I'm a hiker at heart. So I think there's so many amazing hikes that you can do around Vancouver. One of them, which is so popular, I wouldn't really even consider it a hike. It's just kind of more like a tourist attraction, but it's really good, is called the Grouse Grind. So, you got to bring your shorts and your workout gear, but it's about an hour long hike up the side of this mountain called Grouse Mountain. But when you get to the top, there's going to be nachos, ice cold beer, and the most amazing view of Vancouver and the ocean at the top. So definitely.
Is there a restaurant at the top of this thing?
There is, yeah.
Oh, well.
And you can take
nachos.
Yeah,
I can walk for an hour up a hill for cocktails and nachos.
That's literally all I think about as I'm walking up. I just see a picture of a beer at the top, right? And there's also a gondola down, so you don't have to hike
even
down.
Better.
Yeah,
even better. Awesome stuff. Well, Derek, it's been fun chatting. Thanks for coming on the show. Look forward to following along with Canopy and what all you have going on, and talking to you again soon. Thanks again.
Appreciate it, Troy. Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.